When Meghan Markle walked into those negotiations with British Vogue back in 2022, she had no idea she was about to face one of the most humiliating rejections of her post-royal career. But here's the thing that nobody saw coming. The Duchess of Sussex didn't just ask for a magazine feature. She demanded complete and total control over every single aspect of the production. And when Anna Wintour herself shut her down, the entire project collapsed in spectacular fashion. Sources close to the situation revealed to Page 6 that Meghan's list of demands was nothing short of extraordinary. She wanted control over the photographer, she wanted control over the writer, she wanted approval over the final edit, the photos, and even the cover lines. But wait, it gets even more audacious. She didn't just want to appear on the cover of British Vogue, she wanted to grace the September covers of both British Vogue and American Vogue simultaneously. Industry insiders were stunned. One source put it bluntly, saying nobody gets that level of control, not even Beyoncé. The timing couldn't have been worse. Linda Evangelista was already locked in for the UK September cover, and Serena Williams had secured the US version. These slots had been claimed months in advance, but apparently Meghan believed her royal connection would be enough to override everything. When it became clear that Vogue wasn't going to accommodate her impossible demands, she reportedly requested a Zoom call with Anna Wintour to reconsider. Anna agreed, but only to be polite. The fashion icon wasn't budging, and why would she? Vogue has featured the biggest names in entertainment, fashion, and culture for over a century. The magazine doesn't bend its editorial standards for anyone, royal title or not. Edward Enninful, the then editor of British Vogue, was left absolutely furious when the entire feature was cancelled. According to insiders speaking to the Daily Mail, the Duchess and her team had sky-high expectations. They were banking on at least a print cover or a digital cover, but Enninful couldn't meet those expectations. He already had his magazine cover secured for that month, and suddenly the project he'd been developing just vanished into thin air. But here's where this story gets really interesting. This wasn't some isolated incident of diva behavior. This was the beginning of a pattern that would see Meghan systematically alienate herself from the very publications she desperately needs to maintain her Hollywood relevance. What happened with Vogue was just the opening act in a much larger drama, one that would eventually see top magazines quietly removing her from their upcoming issues and editors across the industry exchanging knowing glances whenever her name came up in pitch meetings. The question everyone in publishing circles started asking wasn't whether Meghan would land her next big magazine moment, it was whether anyone would be willing to work with her at all. Fast forward to late 2025, and you'd think Meghan might have learned something from the Vogue disaster. Instead, she landed herself in an even more cringeworthy situation with Harper's Bazaar that had the entire internet buzzing for all the wrong reasons. The December 2025/January 2026 art issue was supposed to be her big comeback moment, her chance to show the world she still had that magazine magic. What actually happened was a masterclass in how to make yourself look completely out of touch. The interview took place in a rented brownstone in New York City, borrowed from a friend naturally. But here's the detail that sent shockwaves through social media. When the journalist arrived for the interview, Meghan literally had herself announced before entering the room. As in, someone actually said out loud, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, like she was still a working royal being presented at a state function, in a rented house, with an audience of one person. The audacity was breathtaking, and the internet absolutely erupted. Royal watchers and critics couldn't believe what they were reading. She's living in California, she stepped back from royal duties over 5 years ago, she's constantly complaining about how terrible the royal institution treated her, and yet she's still insisting on royal protocol in private meetings. The contradiction was almost too perfect. One social media user captured the absurdity perfectly, pointing out that she's not a working royal anymore, and this kind of performance was beyond parody. Then there were the photos. Oh, the photos. Harper's Bazaar did Meghan absolutely dirty with this shoot, and people noticed immediately. The styling was meant to evoke authenticity and natural beauty, but what millions of people saw was washed out, unflattering images that looked more like test shots than actual magazine-quality photography. Even Megyn Kelly weighed in, making pointed comments about how much work Meghan's usual eyeliner does for her appearance. The comparison photos to Princess Diana started flooding social media within hours, with critics accusing her of the creepiest and most sinister cosplay they'd ever witnessed. But perhaps the most telling detail was right there on the cover itself. Her title, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, was prominently displayed, almost desperately so. Royal expert Tom Sykes didn't mince words when he explained what was really happening. According to Sykes, Meghan's frantic insistence on using the Duchess title is an attempt to imprint her family's royal connections on the public before the inevitable removal. With Prince William next in line to the throne and King Charles already stripping titles from other family members like Prince Andrew, the writing is on the wall. The Harper's Bazaar team knew exactly what they were doing. If they truly cared about maintaining a relationship with Meghan or protecting her image, they would have edited out the announcement detail. They would have chosen more flattering photographs, but they didn't, and that silence spoke volumes about how the magazine industry really feels about the Duchess of Sussex these days. The Harper's Bazaar debacle wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest chapter in a story that's been unfolding for years now, and the pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Meghan Markle's relationship with American media has gone from honeymoon phase to complete disaster zone, and the numbers tell a story that even her most loyal defenders can't spin away. Rewind to August 2022. Meghan and Harry were still riding relatively high in American public opinion, still seen as sympathetic figures who'd escaped the clutches of a cold, unwelcoming institution. Then New York Magazine's The Cut sent journalist Allison P. Davis to Montecito for what should have been a puff piece. What the world got instead was the first real sign that American media wasn't going to keep drinking the Kool-Aid forever. Davis's article was fascinating because it wasn't a hit piece in the traditional sense. It didn't attack Meghan outright or make wild accusations. Instead, it simply presented Meghan as she actually was during that interview, and the result was devastating. The observation that Meghan sometimes converses like she has a tiny bachelor producer in her brain directing what she says became instantly iconic. It captured something people had been feeling but couldn't quite articulate: the carefully managed, overly polished quality of every single thing Meghan said and did. And then came the moment that defined the entire interview. Meghan looked around conspiratorially, making sure nobody was listening even though they were alone, and dropped her top-secret bombshell. She was getting back on Instagram. Davis even noted how Meghan delivered this complete nothing with such gravitas that it felt like a troll, like Meghan was serving the media back just a little bit. But it was actually supposed to be news. The disconnect between how Meghan saw herself and how the rest of the world saw her had never been more apparent. The fallout was swift and brutal. Harry's net approval rating dropped 45 points in just 6 weeks following their Netflix documentary, and his book Spare. He went from +38 to -7. Meghan dropped 36 points, plummeting from +36 to -13. By January 2023, only 26% of Americans liked her, while 39% actively disliked her. These weren't numbers that could be blamed on British tabloids or royal family conspiracies. This was America making up its own mind about the Duchess of Sussex. The problem for Meghan was that she'd positioned herself as someone who transcended the stuffy, out-of-touch royal spaces. She was going to appeal to broader, more diverse, more progressive audiences. But magazines like The Cut expect substance from someone who claims to read The Economist. They expect authenticity from someone who constantly preaches about authenticity. When those expectations weren't met, when the interviews delivered nothing but carefully crafted platitudes and tone-deaf announcements, the bubble didn't just deflate, it exploded, and magazines across America started taking notes about what working with Meghan Markle actually meant. Behind every canceled magazine feature and every cringeworthy interview lies a much darker truth that industry insiders have been whispering about for years. Meghan Markle isn't just difficult to work with. According to multiple sources across both sides of the Atlantic, she's created such a toxic work environment that magazines are now factoring in the headache before they even consider putting her on a cover. The bombshell dropped in September 2024, when The Hollywood Reporter published a scathing expose about the Sussex operation. Staff members described Meghan as a dictator in high heels, and the couple's operation was bleeding employees at an alarming rate. The churn rate was so high that people in the industry started keeping track. This wasn't just about demanding bosses or high standards. This was about something fundamentally broken in how Meghan treats the people around her. Then in January 2025, Vanity Fair went even deeper. They spoke directly with Meghan's employees, and the descriptions ranged wildly from lovely, genuine person to cold and withholding. One staff member with ties to her Archetypes podcast took a leave of absence just to escape the environment. Others talked openly about quitting their jobs, taking long absences from work to avoid attention, or going through long-term therapy after working with her. Think about that for a second. Long-term therapy. Because of a job working for someone who constantly presents herself as kind, compassionate, and empathetic. The pattern extended far beyond just her personal staff. When the Vogue situation exploded, Edward Enninful found himself caught in the crossfire of Meghan's impossible demands. Here was someone who'd given her the guest editor opportunity in 2019, who'd worked closely with her on the Forces for Change issue. And yet when she couldn't get her way in 2022, the entire relationship cooled dramatically. Sources say they've drifted apart, reduced to occasional birthday cards and supportive messages. That's what happens when you treat professional relationships as transactions that only matter when they serve your interests. Palace insiders had warned about this during her time as a working royal. The bullying allegations from staff at Kensington Palace weren't just tabloid gossip. Buckingham Palace actually conducted an inquiry, and while they never published the results to protect those who participated, they did modify HR policies and procedures based on what they found. That doesn't happen unless something seriously problematic was uncovered. For magazine editors, all of this information creates a calculation that has nothing to do with Meghan's celebrity or her ability to sell copies. It's about risk management. When you factor in the demands for unprecedented creative control, the potential for staff complaints, the likelihood of cooling relationships with contributors who work with her, and the reputational risk of being associated with someone who's been credibly accused of workplace toxicity, suddenly that cover feature doesn't look so appealing anymore. The juice simply isn't worth the squeeze, and publications are quietly making the decision to remove her from upcoming issues before the drama even starts. If there's one thing that's become absolutely undeniable over the past few years, it's Meghan's obsession with channeling Princess Diana. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Every single attempt to evoke Diana's legacy is backfiring so spectacularly that it's actually accelerating her fall from grace rather than cementing her place in the public's heart. The Harper's Bazaar photo shoot became ground zero for this disaster. Within hours of the images being released, social media exploded with side-by-side comparisons. Meghan sitting cross-legged with her knees up, wearing black trousers and a white shirt, looked eerily similar to Diana's iconic 1994 shoot with photographer Patrick Demarchelier. Political commentator Milo Yiannopoulos didn't hold back, posting the comparison photos and calling Meghan the creepiest, most sinister, most wretched person on the face of the earth. Harsh words, but the sentiment resonated with thousands who'd been watching this Diana cosplay unfold for years. The problem is that Harry has spent years making these comparisons himself, and it's turned the entire subject into a political minefield. During his 2021 Apple TV show The Meow You Can't See, Harry explicitly compared Meghan's media treatment to his mother's tragic end. He said history was repeating itself, that his mother was chased to her death while in a relationship with someone who wasn't white, and now look what's happened. He warned that the media wouldn't stop until Meghan dies. Those comparisons were meant to generate sympathy, but they've actually made every Diana-esque photo shoot and fashion choice feel calculated and manipulative. And then there's South Park. The show absolutely eviscerated them in an episode that cut deeper than any tabloid ever could. The Harry character gives this inspirational speech about authenticity, about how trying to make themselves into a brand has turned them into products, about how what matters is what they have on the inside. When the Meghan character just stares blankly, Harry opens her mouth, peers inside, and shouts hello. The word echoes back, implying she's completely hollow inside. It's brutal satire, but it landed because it captured what so many people feel when Meghan talks endlessly about authenticity while appearing to be anything but. The Harper's Bazaar interview itself became another chapter in this authenticity crisis. Meghan told journalist Caitlin Greenidge that the moment you start making personal decisions based on external judgment, you lose your authenticity. She talked about how there's no such thing as perfect, and how she too gets to make mistakes. The quotes were clearly meant to present her as real and relatable, but coming from someone who demands to be announced into rooms with her royal title, who controls every aspect of her public image down to the smallest detail, the words rang completely hollow. For magazines, this Diana obsession has become a massive liability. Every photo shoot gets scrutinized, every pose compared, every outfit analyzed for Diana references. The backlash is immediate and vicious, and publications are realizing that featuring Meghan means inviting controversy that overshadows whatever message they were trying to convey in the first place. The fashion and media elite operate on relationships, and right now those relationships with Meghan Markle are colder than a London winter. What's fascinating is watching how carefully these industry titans are distancing themselves while still maintaining just enough politeness to avoid becoming the next target of Sussex complaints. Take Edward Enninful, the former editor-in-chief of British Vogue, who once seemed like Meghan's closest ally in the fashion world. Back in 2019, they collaborated on the Forces for Change issue that became the fastest-selling edition in British Vogue's history. Enninful defended her against racist criticism, called the attacks personal, and seemed genuinely invested in her success. Fast forward to today, and that warm friendship has evaporated into occasional birthday cards and sporadic flower deliveries. Sources say they aren't exactly in each other's pockets anymore, maintaining only intermittent contact. That's industry speak for we're being polite. But the relationship is dead. The shift happened after the 2022 Vogue debacle, when Meghan's impossible demands torpedoed what should have been a straightforward feature. Enninful reportedly sent flowers to Meghan in August 2024, a gesture that looks more like professional courtesy than genuine affection. When someone goes from your close collaborator to someone you send obligatory flowers to once a year, the message is crystal clear. You burned that bridge, and there's no rebuilding it. Then there's the Balenciaga Fashion Week situation that exposed just how desperate Meghan has become for fashion credibility. She showed up at the show in October 2025 wearing a bespoke white ensemble, and the optics with Anna Wintour were telling. Yes, they exchanged air kisses. Yes, Wintour complimented her outfit with a polite, beautiful "Sherry, you look amazing." But industry watchers know the difference between genuine warmth and professional courtesy. This was the latter, especially given that Wintour had already firmly rejected Meghan's demands for unprecedented control just a few years earlier. The real drama came when designer Pierpaolo Piccioli's comments to The Cut suggested that Meghan had essentially invited herself to the show. He said she reached out and said she'd love to come support him, making it sound spontaneous and friendly. But the phrasing told a different story. In the fashion world, designers invite people to shows. They don't wait for celebrities to volunteer to attend. The fact that Meghan had to reach out herself, that she had to offer her support rather than being sought after, speaks volumes about where she actually stands in the fashion hierarchy. Even her attempts to rehabilitate these relationships fall flat. When she talks about being friends with Piccioli and texting him regularly, it comes across as trying too hard, as someone desperately clinging to connections that may not be as substantial as she wants the world to believe. The fashion industry runs on exclusivity and cachet. When you have to announce your friendships and explain your invitations, you've already lost the game. And magazines watching these dynamics play out are taking careful notes about whether featuring Meghan is worth the complicated dance of managing her expectations while navigating her increasingly fraught relationships with the very people who make fashion coverage possible. At the end of the day, magazines are businesses, and the cold hard numbers are telling a story that Meghan Markle definitely doesn't want anyone reading. The commercial reality is stark, undeniable, and getting worse by the month. Her brand simply doesn't move the needle anymore, and publishers are making calculated decisions based on metrics that paint a devastating picture. Let's start with her lifestyle brand As Ever, formerly known as American Riviera Orchard. This was supposed to be her Goop moment, her chance to build a lifestyle empire that would rival Gwyneth Paltrow's billion-dollar success story. Instead, the numbers are absolutely brutal. As Ever is getting 4 times less traffic than Goop. And we're not talking about a close competition here. Goop has established itself as a legitimate lifestyle destination, despite all the controversy and jade egg mockery. Meghan's brand, by contrast, is barely registering a pulse with consumers. Industry insiders aren't holding back their assessments either. Kinsey Schofield, host of the Today for Daily podcast, told Fox News Digital that nobody is looking at American Riviera Orchard thinking this is going to be a home run. Think about how damning that statement is. Before the brand even properly launches, before consumers have had a real chance to engage with the products, industry experts are already writing it off as a failure. That's not speculation, that's people who understand the market looking at the fundamentals and seeing disaster written all over them. The Netflix show is facing similar problems. Originally announced for early 2025, the cooking, gardening, and entertaining series keeps getting delayed. Page 6 reported that some Archwell staffers are involved, which sounds like positive momentum until you realize that having to pull from your foundation staff suggests you're having trouble attracting top-tier television production talent. The show that was supposed to launch alongside the brand and create this perfect synergy of content and commerce is stuck in development limbo. For magazines, these failures create a serious credibility problem. If you put Meghan on your cover to promote a lifestyle brand that nobody's visiting, or a Netflix show that keeps getting pushed back, or products that aren't selling, what message does that send to your readers? Publications build their reputations on being ahead of trends, on spotlighting success stories and cultural moments that matter. Featuring someone whose ventures are quietly tanking doesn't just fail to sell magazines, it actively damages the publication's brand as a tastemaker. The jam incident perfectly encapsulated this disconnect. When Meghan sent out jars of American Riviera Orchard jam to celebrity friends, it was clearly meant to generate organic buzz and social media excitement. Instead, it became a punchline. The idea that celebrity-branded jam would somehow be the thing to turn her reputation around struck people as so absurd that even sympathetic observers couldn't defend it. And magazines watching that play out in real time are asking themselves a very simple question. If her own product launches are becoming jokes, why would we stake our credibility on giving her a platform? The numbers don't lie, and right now they're telling a story of complete and utter rejection that even Meghan's most skilled PR team can't spin into something positive. We're not talking about a temporary dip in popularity or a rough patch that time will heal. We're witnessing a full-scale reputation death spiral that's accelerating with each passing month. October 2025 brought the most devastating blow yet. Ranker conducted a poll of 48,000 people across the United States, asking them to rank celebrities they dislike. Out of thousands of public figures, influencers, actors, musicians, and personalities, Meghan Markle came out on top, not as the most liked, as the most disliked celebrity in America. Let that sink in for a moment. In a country of over 300 million people, with countless controversial figures competing for that dubious honor, Meghan Markle won by enough of a margin that 48,000 respondents agreed she was the worst. Across the Atlantic, the situation is somehow even more dire. Royal expert Ingrid Seward, editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and author of My Mother and I, delivered a brutal assessment to Fox News Digital. She stated flatly that Meghan will never win over the UK public again. Not in this generation, she insisted. Maybe there's a younger generation that Meghan might win over, but Seward couldn't see it happening with anyone currently paying attention. She acknowledged that everyone agrees Meghan is gorgeous looking and very stylish, but immediately followed that up with the killer observation. It doesn't mean that you like her. People in the UK simply don't like her. The shift from admiration to animosity happened with stunning speed. Remember, this is someone who was once hailed as a breath of fresh air for Britain's royal family. She was supposed to modernize the monarchy, bring diversity and contemporary values to an ancient institution. The wedding drew massive global audiences. The early tours showed genuine public enthusiasm. And then it all collapsed, not over years but over months, as each interview revealed more contradictions, each complaint sounded more tone-deaf, each demand for privacy came packaged with another media project. Her attempts at redemption keep making things worse. Every magazine interview that's supposed to show her authentic side reveals more carefully crafted messaging. Every photo shoot meant to display vulnerability gets compared to Diana and accused of manipulation. Every business venture positioned as empowering women or supporting small businesses gets dissected and found wanting. The Harper's Bazaar cover that should have been a fresh start instead became another example of everything people find grating about her. The announcement into the room, the desperate clinging to the Duchess title, the hollow talk about authenticity while performing for the cameras. South Park's devastating parody resonated so strongly because it articulated what millions were thinking. The show depicted Harry realizing that what matters is what you have inside, then looking into Meghan's mouth and hearing his voice echo back, indicating complete emptiness. It was savage, but it captured something real about how the public perceives her now. And magazines understand that associating their brand with someone at the center of that kind of cultural mockery is professional suicide. While Meghan maintains her carefully curated public image of confidence and empowerment, sources close to the situation paint a very different picture of what's happening behind closed doors in Montecito. The panic is real, the desperation is palpable, and the realization that her carefully constructed post-royal empire is crumbling has apparently sent shockwaves through the Sussex camp. The solo projects have become the most visible sign of trouble. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, Harry and Meghan increasingly appeared at separate events, pursued different ventures, and presented themselves as individuals rather than the united front they'd spent years cultivating. The divorce rumors became so persistent and so widespread that Harry himself felt compelled to shut them down publicly. But here's the thing, when you have to deny divorce rumors, when the speculation gets loud enough that it requires an official response, the damage is already done. The public narrative has shifted from power couple to troubled marriage, and that's nearly impossible to reverse. Sources speaking to Page 6 revealed that Meghan and her team had sky-high expectations for magazine coverage that simply haven't materialized. They were expecting print covers or at minimum digital covers from top-tier publications. They believed her royal connection and her activism would make her an irresistible subject for editors. Instead, they've faced rejection after rejection, and when features do happen, they backfire spectacularly. The gap between expectation and reality has apparently created serious tension within her team. One insider who knows the couple told the outlet that they're going to be criticized no matter what they do. When they appear together, headlines accuse Meghan of being too controlling or trying to steal the spotlight. When they work separately, people speculate about divorce and dysfunction. The source's comments had a distinctly defeatist tone, the kind of resignation that suggests they've tried everything and nothing is working. That's not the confidence of a team that believes they're on the verge of a breakthrough. That's the exhaustion of people who realize they're losing a war of public opinion. The commercial ventures that were supposed to provide financial independence and cultural relevance are all facing serious headwinds. Netflix keeps delaying her lifestyle show. American Riviera Orchard / As Ever can't gain traction with consumers. The podcast ventures that once seemed promising have fizzled. Each setback feeds into the next, creating a cycle where failures make it harder to secure the next opportunity, which leads to more failures, which further damages the brand. What particularly telling is how magazine editors are now approaching the Meghan question. It's not about whether she'd be an interesting subject or whether readers would want to know more about her life. It's about risk assessment. Publications are asking themselves whether the headache of dealing with her demands, the likelihood of backlash from readers who actively dislike her, and the potential for the feature to become a story about the interview itself rather than whatever message they intended to convey, are worth whatever benefit her name might bring. And increasingly, the answer they're arriving at is a firm no. The writing isn't just on the wall anymore. It's been printed, published, and distributed to newsstands across the globe, and the message for Meghan Markle couldn't be clearer. The magazine industry has collectively decided that she's not worth the trouble, and the implications for her Hollywood dreams are absolutely devastating. Royal experts have stopped sugarcoating the prognosis. Ingrid Seward's assessment that Meghan will never win back the UK public in this generation isn't just one person's opinion. It's becoming the consensus view among people who've spent decades analyzing analyzing royal dynamics and public sentiment. When someone with Seward's credentials and access says things change very quickly but I cannot see it happening, that's not pessimism. That's informed analysis based on decades of watching how these stories unfold. The younger generation represents Meghan's only hope, but even that's uncertain given how thoroughly her reputation has been shredded across all age demographics. The American market, which was supposed to be her safe haven after escaping the British media, has turned just as hostile. Being ranked the most disliked celebrity in America isn't a PR problem you can spin away with a heartfelt Instagram post or a friendly magazine interview. It's a fundamental rejection of everything she represents, and it's backed by polling data from tens of thousands of people. Magazines understand that putting someone that unpopular on their cover is essentially telling their readers that editorial judgment doesn't matter, that controversy matters more than quality. Here's the cruel irony that nobody saw coming. Meghan spent years complaining about being silenced, about not having control over her own narrative, about media misrepresentation. Now she has all the freedom in the world to tell her story, to choose her platforms, to craft her message exactly as she wants it. And what's happened? Each magazine appearance has made things worse, not better. Each carefully orchestrated interview has revealed more inauthenticity, more contradiction, more of the exact behavior she claimed to be fighting against. The problem was never the lack of control. The problem is what happens when she has complete control and uses it to demand royal announcements in rented houses and Diana cosplay photo shoots. Magazine editors are making cold calculations now. They're looking at someone whose lifestyle brand is failing, whose Netflix projects keep getting delayed, whose approval ratings are in freefall, whose staff describes needing therapy after working with her, and whose every public appearance generates mockery rather than admiration. They're asking themselves why they would devote cover space, editorial resources, and their publication's credibility to someone who brings nothing but headaches and backlash. The magazines aren't removing Meghan from upcoming issues because they're conspiring against her or because they're part of some media establishment that never gave her a fair chance. They're removing her because she's bad for business, toxic for morale, and fundamentally unable to deliver the kind of authentic, compelling content that makes for great journalism. And that realization, spreading through editorial offices from New York to London, represents the final nail in the coffin of Meghan Markle's magazine career, and possibly her entire Hollywood reinvention. So what do you think? Is Meghan's magazine career completely finished, or could she somehow turn this disaster around? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over. And if you found this deep dive into Meghan's magazine meltdown as shocking as we did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Glamour Report. We've got our finger on the pulse of every royal scandal, every Hollywood betrayal, and every celebrity crisis as it unfolds. The next video is waiting, and trust me, you won't believe what's coming next.